Welcome to October. This is October 1st, everyone, and it's going to be a warm week for a good part of the country, but we're also going to be watching the tropics as it continues to remain active. We're still at 30% still left of hurricane season, and there's yet another area of disturbed weather down there into the Western Caribbean that looks to make it into the Gulf of Mexico by this weekend, and that could possibly form into our next tropical system. So we'll be breaking down the details for you in this update. Take a look at the big picture on the North American view. You can see what's happening, folks. We've got a predominant zonal flow that's coming off the Pacific. That is a very warm wind, and in fact, they've got numerous record high temperatures today. About 20 of them going to be breaking across the country. It's not going to feel like October by any stretch of the imagination. All the cooler air is really kind of bottled up here in Canada at the moment. So we'll be dealing with that zonal flow, and the zonal flow is almost really a kind of a drier flow as well. So for a good part of the country, you are going to be drying out in a big way. You can see a lot of states here not really seeing much of anything as the jet stream is lifting well to the north up here in Canada. Really what's left over of Helene is still around. Actually, this is just the remnants, is actually that low pressure, the combination of Helene and the upper level low that brought all the devastating flooding in and around the Carolinas. That's still dropping some heavier rains in portions of West Virginia and as well as into Kentucky. But that's going to be starting to subside as well as the remnants will finally leave, trying to get out of here. But all of our attention will be turning into the tropics because we still are in hurricane season. We've got about 30% left of hurricane season that goes all the way through the end of November. So in fact, we've got 2 months still left of official hurricane season. You can see Kirk, there's just a formidable storm. In fact, this is going to be our next major hurricane. Luckily for this one will likely be turning safely out to sea and actually going to be missing Bermuda as well. This is yet another system. This will likely be Leslie. This is probably going to be forming even today. That's also going to be another potential formidable storm, but also that's going to be likely lifting out to sea as well. This would likely be Milton if it does in fact form. We do have a 40% chance of something turning tropical in the next 7 days. Right now, it's just a kind of an area of low pressure down there into the far outskirts of the Western Caribbean. But most indications have this lifting northwestward and eventually make it into the Gulf of Mexico by the time we get into late this weekend. So we're going to break down all those details for you in this update. If you look at the overall satellite picture, you can kind of see what's happening here. There is the remnants of what's left over of Helene right now. And then there's those 2 storms out there, way out there into the Atlantic, not going to affect anybody. But there's the instability down there in the Caribbean. You can actually not much happening, right? It's just an area of thunderstorms that the National Hurricane Center is keeping an eye on. And there's also another conglomerate thunderstorms here. What's going to happen is this piece of energy will likely lift northwestward over the coming days. And also this piece of energy will likely cross over into the Bay of Campeche. And those also have some lower pressures down there. So there's actually 2 levels of circulation that we'll be watching later on this week. And as will, most of the U.S. will be remaining high and dry. So even the next 48 hours, I mean, look at the precipitation map, folks. I mean, pretty much good part of the country is not really going to be seeing a drop of rainfall, right? I mean, this is the remnants of what's left over Helene, but luckily it's only just kind of sporadic showers. There's really not much activity happening. That's a good thing because these areas definitely need to be starting to dry out. Most of the instability and really the only action right now is in Florida, and that's mainly central and southern Florida with just that tropical type feed of moisture. And that could be just what's to come for Florida as more tropical type rains look to inundate the state, especially as we head into late weekend into early next week. But the zonal flow is pretty prevalent, folks. I mean, look at the jet stream. This is well to the north, right in Canada right here, but underneath it you've got these big circles of heat dome, plenty of warm air. That's why we're getting some of those record temperatures, especially for the deep south. I mean, we're talking well to the 90s. You've got 97 in Austin and San Antonio. I didn't think even a spot in Montana the other day hit 100 degrees. Crazy warm for this time of year, and well into the hundreds, triple digits, all-time record, latest record temperatures in the Southwest. I mean, daily record high temperatures keep unfolding across that region on literally on a daily basis, unfortunately, for the desert Southwest. And yeah, pretty warm, folks. I mean, yeah, this doesn't look like October by any of the stretch of the imagination. All the cooler air, if there's anything, is just kind of bottled up in Canada. But nonetheless, with that zonal flow, even headed into Thursday, it's going to be plenty warm for, October type standards. And there's not going to be much precipitation to talk about either, right? I mean, it's with that zonal flow and with the just the drier air mass, there's going to be a lot of sunshine, right? A lot of sunshine across a good part of the lower 48. But you can see the soupy air mass. It's trying to bubble up down there into the Gulf of Mexico. That is the area that we'll be watching, especially as we get late into the weekend, because right now this is where the X is, right? You got the little X down here, and this is where it's going to be lifting. So by the time we get into, this is your Saturday time frame, we're likely going to have a little bit of vorticity trying to develop a little area of low pressure down there into the Gulf of Mexico. And then there's what was down here is going to be right here into the Bay of Campeche. So this is these two areas of low pressure that we'll be watching and see if they can just kind of fester over time and turn into something tropical. That's why the National Hurricane Center has, about a 40% probability of something forming in the next 7 days of all these two dynamics, right? This is the higher water content, down there in the Bay of Campeche, and then also into the central Gulf of Mexico. And the front, there is going to be a front, not much behind the front or either like cooler air, but there is going to be a front that's going to be dropping southbound. It's also going to be producing a lot of shear as well, kind of keep this thing at bay, if you will, but also keep it from going any further north as well, pressing it into Florida with those tropical rains, feeding it into central and southern Florida. There's the ridge of high pressure, and the zonal flow just continues. This would be your Saturday by then. Yeah, plenty of warm air continuing for a good part of the lower 48 as we'll be watching that low pressure. And that's what's actually, the warmer temperatures is actually what's going to, over time, help lower the pressures underneath in the Caribbean. And that's what we've been seeing, kind of a warmer overall September. We're starting off definitely a warmer October so far, and it's still hurricane season, and we're still going to be active. It got off to a kind of a later start, and it's going to end on a busy note. So we got plenty of left in this hurricane season that we have to keep an eye on. And there's the weekend, folks, right? You got plenty of warm air continuing to funnel into the lower 48. Not much cooler air to speak of in these substantial standards at all, as we'll be watching the tropics. But look at that. I mean, it's just kind of rare to see over a 5-day span of just not much, right? See, you had all the moisture. You had all the moisture from Helene. There was estimated 20 of upwards to approaching almost 40 trillion gallons of multiple states over a 5-day period from Helene. That's what left off of the devastating flooding. But obviously that had a lot of energy into that environment, and now it's just zapped out every piece of energy out of the atmosphere. And the next 5 days just look bone dry for a good part of the country. It's not really until again Saturday that we'll be trying to keep our eyes down here into the Gulf of Mexico. But yes, definitely Florida stays on the wet side, unfortunately. But that really, besides the remnants of Helene the next day or two, that's going to be moving out, and even the Northeast is going to start to dry out as well. So we'll be watching, and what we'll be watching is this area of low pressure. So even the ensembles are kind of hinting at this is going to get into the Gulf of Mexico. We don't know how strong this is going to be, but with the fronts are going to be coming down and the shear that's going to be elongated along the Gulf Coast, we're having more confidence that it's going to stay down there into the Gulf of Mexico, and it could fester over a period of time. But unfortunately, funneling that tropical moisture into central and southern Florida. This is over the European ensembles, and this is your GFS ensembles. Still a conglomerate of low pressure centers into the Gulf of Mexico from now until next Tuesday. And there's formidable storms out there with Kirk, and which would likely be Leslie in the week ahead. And this, if it does form, would likely be Milton and out into the Gulf of Mexico. So we'll be watching it, but nonetheless, even for Sunday, folks, yeah, there's not much happening. This little vorticity is what's going to cause this to actually lift it a little bit further north. But also, once this presses and moves it, northeast, this is what's likely going to be pressing it northeast bound as well. So the front is going to keep it, and the shear is going to keep it at bay in the Gulf of Mexico. This vorticity is going to keep it pressed south as well. And it's also going to be pressing it further off to the east. So most guidance has pushing like at least tropical moisture, whether it forms or not, tropical moisture into the state of Florida with heavier rains. There's a look by Monday. So this would be 6 days from now. This is Tuesday when I'm recording the video on October 1st. But yeah, we got the little trough that comes in from the north, brings some cooler anomalies in here for the northeast. Not much cool air, but definitely on what they are considering where they are right now. But that's also going to be the culprit of keeping this, whatever is going to be coming out of the Gulf, pressed southward into the Gulf and likely spreading its moisture into central and southern Florida. So yeah, this is your water vapor content showing that trough coming in from the northeast. That's going to be pressing it, keeping this Gulf of Mexico at bay, and likely spread whatever comes out of the Gulf of Mexico into possibly Florida. So yeah, the icon is probably the most bullish right now, takes it into a hurricane. We don't really know the intensity at the moment. So right now we're just watching an area of low pressure right down there, well down south into the Western Caribbean. That's likely going to be lifting north. We'll definitely know more, but it definitely looks like to be more tropical rains for Florida. And hopefully it doesn't turn into something significant of any standard. But nonetheless, yeah, a good part of the low 48 is going to be pretty much dry for a good part of the week ahead, and even into early next week. Most of the instability, if not all the instability, is really further south with those tropical moisture. And unfortunately, with it pressing southward and taking all the energy out of the atmosphere, Florida could get definitely some flooding, some heavier rain. So we'll just have to watch this setup because it's a compounding effect. They're going to be getting some rains for the next couple of days, but once the tropical moisture starts feeding in, they could be getting definitely some torrential rains for several days. And this is Tuesday, and then even going into Wednesday of next week. So we'll be definitely keeping an eye on this channel for you. So I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button, and catch me next update. Why I protect you before and after the storm.